Q&A Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @Q&A Review, that is @ CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@qnreview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
From the National, Friday the 7th of February 2025, from the news section. Labour fear energy bills set to rise further, despite cut pledge. Article written by Hamish Morrison. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband has suggested he fears bills will keep rising, despite Labour's pledges to cut energy bills by £300 a year. On Thursday, a jump in inflation was accredited to higher than expected energy prices, as well as rising water bills and bus fares. It came as the Bank of England cut interest rates to 4.5%, but painted a gloomy picture for the UK economy overall. Former Labour leader Miliband told the BBC that the UK is in the grip of markets run by petrostates, and home-sourced energy could help reassert control. Separately, he also said it is the right thing for the UK to keep oil and gas fields that are already licensed operating, but that for the future there will be a shift away from fossil fuels. Asked on BBC Breakfast about rising bills and the Bank of England's judgments on Thursday, Miliband said, "What we are seeing in the global fossil fuel markets is prices up 60% compared to a year ago. That's because of geopolitical events in part. This is our whole point. I fear that bills will keep rising, and this is our whole point, which is the only way to bring bills down, the only way to get control back, is to have clean, homegrown power that we control. Because at the moment, we're in the grip of markets that we don't control, run by petrostates and dictators, and that is what is happening. So global markets are seeing fossil fuel prices rise, and that is having an impact on British consumers." He added, "The only way we reassert that control is by having this clean, homegrown power." Thursday's Monetary Policy Report suggested inflation could peak at 3.75% late this summer as energy price rises, higher water bills and a rise in bus fares contribute to an increase in the cost of living. During the election campaign, senior Labour figures claimed that their policy to create GB Energy would slash bills by up to £300. Just under a month before the election last July, Keir Starmer tweeted, "Labour's first step to set up Great British Energy will save families up to £300 a year off their energy bills." And Rachel Reeves said, "Great British Energy, a publicly owned energy company, will cut energy bills by up to £300. On Thursday, the Prime Minister said he would not preempt a decision on the Rosebank oil field, after a judge upheld a legal challenge by environmental campaigners against the decision to grant consent. Miliband, in charge of the government's policy on energy security and net zero, also declined to get into specifics, but said that individual projects will be assessed on the basis of the objective criteria we have. While in opposition, Miliband labelled the Conservatives' plan on energy and net zero, which included the potential licensing of Rosebank, as a colossal waste of taxpayers' money and climate vandalism. Speaking to Times Radio on Friday morning, he was asked about his previous comments and what is happening with the Rosebank project northwest of Shetland. He told the station that how projects are assessed previously did not take scope of the effects of burning oil and gas. "We're currently consulting on how we do that," he said. "Once that consultation is completed, we will then assess individual projects on the basis of the objective criteria we have. I can't, as Secretary of State, I'm afraid, get into the details of individual projects that might come before me, but that's the approach we'll take." Miliband went on, "We said we will keep existing oil and gas fields that are already licensed, continue to operate for their lifetime. That's the right thing to do. For the future, The answer for Britain is not going to be fossil fuels. That article was written by Hamish Morrison and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 7th of February 2025, from the Politics section. Ed Miliband, I will consider Acorn in bid to save Grangemouth jobs. Article written by Hamish Morrison. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband has said he will consider fast-tracking a carbon capture and storage project in Scotland, adding the move could help secure a future for workers at the Grangemouth oil refinery. The site, which is Scotland's only oil refinery, is due to close in the coming months, with owners at Petronius having already sent out redundancy notices to some of the 400 workers there. Some have proposed linking the site with a proposed Acorn carbon capture and storage project in Aberdeenshire in a bid to secure skilled industrial employment for the Grangemouth workers. This would take climate-damaging CO2 emissions from Grangemouth's industrial processes and transport them to Acorn, from where they would be sent to be stored in subsea rock formations underneath the North Sea. The UK government has already provided funding for two similar carbon capture clusters in Merseyside and Teesside, with First Minister John Swinney criticising ministers in London for their lack of support so far for the Acorn scheme. Asked on Friday if he would commit to fast-tracking the project to help secure some sort of future for Grangemouth, Miliband said he would obviously look at such a proposal. He told Times Radio, We are determined to have a future for that Grangemouth site and for the Grangemouth community. That's what we're working on, actually, alongside the Scottish Government, something called Project Willow, which is a whole project which will be published later this month or early next, on looking at how we can make the most of the potential resources at Grangemouth. Carbon capture and storage could be part of it. Sustainable aviation fuel could be part of it. Speaking about Grangemouth, Miliband said, There's huge potential on that site, and we are absolutely determined, for the sake of that community, the Scottish economy, the UK economy, to do that. His comments came after Swinney told MSPs on Thursday he was becoming increasingly impatient about the lack of support given to the Acorn carbon capture and storage project by politicians at Westminster. The First Minister said he had been assured by the previous Conservative government that the project would go ahead, but it has not been taken forward by the Labour government. He also recalled Labour had promised to help the Grangemouth workers during last year's general election campaign, with Swinney saying so far this had not been fulfilled. Russell Borthwick, the chief executive of Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, meanwhile, welcomed Miliband's comments. Borthwick said, The Secretary of State is right to consider an accelerated timeline for Acorn, which is an economic imperative for both the North East and wider Scottish economy. There is no better opportunity to deliver economic growth and clean power, two stated missions of the government, than progressing the Scottish cluster. He added, Carbon capture technology is game-changing technology, which can create tens of thousands of jobs across the country. However, if we are serious about decarbonisation, then we must move much faster and more comprehensively than we have to date. The UK will need all 5 of its proposed carbon capture clusters, and possibly more, if it is to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Therefore, the government should be progressing all clusters at pace, in particular the Acorn project in Aberdeenshire, which the Prime Minister has seen for himself is shovel-ready. On Thursday, Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar endured a grilling over his party's broken promise to save the refinery, saying that he would continue to press the issue. That article was written by Hamish Morrison and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 7th of February 2025, from the News section. Historic Charles Rennie Mackintosh building set to reopen in Glasgow. Article written by Sarah Hilly. The A-listed Lighthouse building, which has been mostly shut since the pandemic, is to be opened to the public again. Proposals have been approved for the sandstone Charles Rennie Mackintosh designed property to become a base for start-up firms and be open to tourists and schools. It is hoped over the next 10 years thousands of jobs will be created. Long-term lease negotiations with Sustainable Ventures Scotland Limited will now begin with the City Council, which owns 88% of the floor space in the building. The Lighthouse will host small technology companies focused on the climate. Councillors gave the go-ahead at the Contracts and Property Committee yesterday. Speaking at the meeting, Councillor Rory Kelly, SNP, said, "Having seen what Sustainable Ventures have done on their 2 projects in London and Manchester, it looks really promising for the city in terms of the protection of another heritage asset. This is one of the top priorities for, I'm sure, the vast majority of people in the city, given the significance." The convener for Built Heritage and Development said finding a sustainable and long-term use is the most important thing for buildings so they can be maintained by occupiers who make sure they are heated, wind and watertight, and will have repairs carried out. He pointed out the venue will also be an incubator for green high-tech businesses, which is beneficial to the economy and will create additional jobs. Labour councillor Kevin Lally said he is pleased about the building being maintained and the public having access again. The lighthouse was formerly home to the Glasgow Herald and, from 1999, Scotland's Centre for Architecture, Design and the City. It hosted a permanent Macintosh exhibition. That article was written by Sarah Hilly and read to you by Elizabeth. From the National, Friday the 7th of February 2025, from the Politics section. John Swinney to stand united with Scottish farmers amid tax fears. First Minister John Swinney will pledge to stand united with Scotland's farmers in the wake of tax changes proposed by the UK government. Swinney will use a speech to the National Farmers Union Scotland AGM on Friday to say that sweeping changes from Labour at Westminster are adding to pressures on the farming sector. The challenges are very demanding for farmers, he will say, telling the audience that Brexit and the implications of climate change mean the agriculture community is facing incredibly challenging circumstances. Swinney will add that farmers are right to be outraged about tax changes being brought in by the UK government. Across the UK, there has been anger from farmers over upcoming inheritance tax changes for farming businesses, which will limit the 100% relief for farms to only the first £1 million of combined agricultural and business property. For anything above that, landowners will pay a 20% tax rate rather than the standard 40% rate of inheritance tax applied to other land and property. Swinney will tell the AGM in Glasgow that having represented a rural constituency for over 25 years, he has seen how farmers have navigated huge challenges through some very demanding years. He will tell the meeting he understands the importance of farming to the rural economy and is determined to ensure there is a sustainable and prosperous future for farming in Scotland. Swinney will add, "I know that farming is tougher because of the context in which you are operating today. The impact of Brexit and the implications of climate change create a set of conditions that are incredibly challenging. The sweeping changes the UK government has introduced without any consultation with the farming community or the devolved governments only add to the pressures farmers are facing. They are a cause of real anxiety, and farmers are right to be outraged, and I am particularly concerned about the impact on Scottish tenant farms, with some at risk of being caught up in the tax change." He will go on to state, "Let me be crystal clear. The Scottish Government stands united with Scotland's farmers in opposition to these changes. This government has your back. We are committed to supporting our nation's farmers." The UK Government has been contacted for comment. That article was written by Katrine Bussey and read to you by Elizabeth. From the National, Friday the 7th of February 2025, from the Culture section. Translated runes from Galloway Hoard shed new light on who owned it. Article written by Gregor Young. A newly translated runic inscription has shed compelling new light on who might have owned the Galloway hoard, experts have announced. The Viking Age hoard, which contains more than 5 kilograms of gold, silver and other materials, was discovered by a metal detectorist in Balmahee near Kirkcudbright in 2014. Since then, the question of who owned the hoard has remained a mystery. A number of theories have been put forward, with some suggesting it might have been buried by 4 owners, based on 4 arm rings inscribed with Anglo-Saxon runes. 3 of the inscriptions feature Old English name elements, but the 4th and longest inscription has confounded experts and remained undeciphered as there was no recognisable direct translation. However, researchers at National Museums Scotland, NMS, who have been studying the hoard, have proposed a new translation for the fourth inscription. This is the community's wealth or property. Martin Goldberg at NMS said the translation marked a significant development in our understanding of the Galloway hoard. The idea that the wealth this hoard represents would be communally held is fascinating, he said. It does still leave us with unanswered questions around the circumstances in which a community's wealth would come to be buried, and also which particular community. Some material within the hoard, such as the pectoral cross and the rock crystal jar made for a Bishop Heigold, would support this being a religious community. The breakthrough came when researchers realized that the runic inscription carved inside the curved half of the arm ring reading, "Dis is Igna F," might be technically wrong. The main issue, they said, was the word Ignaf, which did not correspond to any language spoken in early medieval Britain or Ireland. The discovery that the final rune, F, was marked out with puncts or dots to either side, indicating it could be understood as the name of the F rune itself, Fio, wealth or property, unlocked the new translation. The researchers said Igna could then be interpreted as the Old English word Higna, community, with the first letter spelled in an unusual but comprehensible way. They added that the word dis also seems to be misspelled, but that it likely means this, with the th being pronounced as a d, as in the case in parts of modern Ireland. Despite these apparent mistakes, the researchers said the full inscription can therefore be translated as, "This is the community's wealth or property," adding that the word Higna is often used elsewhere in Anglo-Saxon documents to indicate a religious community. Runologist Dr. David Parsons from the University of Wales, who has previously translated other runic inscriptions from the hoard, said the apparent mistakes could be accounted for by variations in the way runes were used. "This is a difficult and unusual inscription, and the proposed translation is challenging," he said. "There are a number of things which are technically wrong when we compare it with what we know about correct runic writing. However, if we think about both spoken and written English today, there are a huge range of regional and idiomatic variations, and if we allow for this, then it becomes possible to accept this as a plausible reading. And in the context of what we can deduce about the Galloway hoard, it becomes really quite compelling." The new finding comes at the conclusion of a 3-year research project called Unwrapping the Galloway Hoard, which was supported by the UKRI Arts and Humanities Research Council, AHRC. Christopher Smith, chairman of the AHRC, said, "It has been fascinating to see the succession of significant discoveries over the life of the Unwrapping the Galloway Hoard project, from the exotic origins of some of its star pieces to the presence of named individuals, and now this latest exciting discovery." The arm ring will be on display at the South Australian Museum in Adelaide as part of a new international touring exhibition, Treasures of the Viking Age, the Galloway Hoard, which opens on Saturday. Further venues for the international tour are set to be announced in due course, as well as plans for the hoard's future display after the tour's conclusion, including in Kirkcudbright, near where it was discovered. That article was written by Gregor Young and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 7th of February 2025, from the Politics section. Donald Trump sanctions International Criminal Court. Article written by Alistair Ferguson. Donald Trump has signed an executive order to impose sanctions on the International Criminal Court, ICC, following The Hague's investigations into Israel, accusing the body of illegitimate and baseless actions. The US President's order grants broad powers to impose asset freezes and travel bans against ICC staff and their family members if they have been judged to be involved in the investigation or prosecution of US citizens and certain allies, which include Israel. In November, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister, Yoav Gallant, for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. Trump's executive order follows a visit by Netanyahu to Washington and has accused the ICC of engaging in illegitimate and baseless actions targeting America and our close ally Israel, and of abusing its power by issuing baseless arrest warrants against the Israeli Prime Minister. The ICC has no jurisdiction over the United States or Israel, the order states. Trump added the ICC had abused its power by issuing the warrants, which he claimed had set a dangerous precedent that endangered US citizens and its military personnel. This malign conduct in turn threatens to infringe upon the sovereignty of the United States and undermines the critical national security and foreign policy work of the United States government and our allies, including Israel, he added. Neither the US nor Israel are among the ICC's 124 members, which is a permanent court of last resort for the prosecution of individuals accused of atrocities, as the US has long held suspicions that a global court of unelected judges could arbitrarily prosecute its country's officials. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has applauded Trump's sanctions, as he said, "Thank you, President Trump, for your bold ICC executive order. It will defend America and Israel from the anti-American and anti-Semitic corrupt court that has no jurisdiction or basis to engage in lawfare against us." The order says the US will impose tangible and significant consequences on those responsible for the ICC's transgressions. Action may include blocking property and assets and not including ICC officials, employees and relatives to enter the United States. It was unclear if the Trump administration would announce the names of specific individuals targeted by the sanctions. ICC officials have reportedly prepared for sanctions to impact senior figures at the court, including its chief prosecutor, Karim Khan. Last week, a bill that would have imposed sweeping sanctions against the ICC was stalled in the Senate after Democrats refused to back the legislation. The Secretary General of Amnesty International, Agnes Callamard, said, "Trump's order sends the message that Israel is above the law and the universal principles of international justice." She added, "Today's executive order is vindictive. It is aggressive. It is a brutal step that seeks to undermine and destroy what the international community has painstakingly constructed over decades, if not centuries. Global rules that are applicable to everyone and aim to deliver justice for all." Other human rights activists said sanctioning court officials would have a chilling effect and run counter to US interests in other conflicts where the court is investigating. Responding to the signing of the order, American Civil Liberties Union's National Security Project lawyer Charlie Hogle said, "Victims of human rights abuses around the world turn to the International Criminal Court when they have nowhere else to go, and President Trump's executive order will make it harder for them to find justice. The order also raises serious First Amendment concerns because it puts people in the United States at risk of harsh penalties for helping the court identify and investigate atrocities committed anywhere by anyone." Hogle added the order is an attack on both accountability and free speech. Washington Director of Human Rights Watch, Sarah Yeager, added, "You can disagree with the court in the way it operates, but this is beyond the pale." That article was written by Alistair Ferguson and read to you by Elizabeth.
From the National, Monday the 10th of February 2025, from the news section. Angela Rayner does not deny calling Prince Andrew that nonce. By Joe Scotting, Casual Reporter. Angela Rayner has refused to deny referring to Prince Andrew as that nonce. The quote comes from a new book, Get In, Labour Under Keir Starmer, which details the party's reinvention under its incumbent leader. The book claims she used that phrase when referring to the disgraced royal during the development of the line of succession bill. Asked about the claim, Rayner told the BBC's Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg, "I'm not making any comment on what somebody suggests was said in a book, or actually the private conversations that I did have during the passage of the bill, which did get passed, and I did pass the bill, and I wholeheartedly supported the government at the time in passing the line of succession bill through Parliament." Prince Andrew has become a toxic figure for the royals due to his links to the billionaire paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. The Duke has denied any wrongdoing. Elsewhere, the book on Starmer also claims that Rayner said that the Prime Minister is incapable of running a bath, which she dismissed as tittle-tattle. She explained, "Me and Keir don't always agree on everything, but the one thing I will say about him is he won't do what he thinks is popular. There's a lot of things that were said in that book that I don't recognise, to be honest, and it's tittle-tattle. So I don't recognise what was said in that book." She added, There are lots of other things that people have said about me or anyone else, and no, I don't recognise ever saying that to anybody, but we all have frustrations when we're at work sometimes. It comes after reports that a school named after the Duke of York is set to be rebranded to something less controversial. Prince Andrew School, the only secondary school in the remote British Overseas Territory of St Helena, is asking its students to suggest something more neutral. The decision stems from the recent public controversy and negative media coverage. A statement from the government of St Helena said, "Buckingham Palace was informed of the move. It is understood." And that article was written by Joe Scotting. From the National, Monday the 10th of February 2025, from the news section, Grieving Scottish Community to Line Streets for Hope's Day by Laura Pollock. A grieving West Lothian community is set to line the streets of Livingston on Monday for the final journey of 6-year-old Hope Gordon. The schoolgirl was found dead alongside her 36-year-old father Mark at a house in West Calder on January the 20th. Police said that they are treating her death as murder, but that her father is not being treated as suspicious. Police said they are treating her death as murder, but that her father's is not being treated as suspicious. A private family service is set to take place at Co-op Funeral Care in Howden South on what Hope's family are calling Hope's Day. The family has then called on the community to line the streets leading to the town's Adambury Cemetery as Hope passes by in a horse-drawn carriage. In a message posted on social media titled Hope's Final Journey, Co-op Funeral Care said, "Hope will leave Co-op Funeral Care Livingston at approximately 12:45pm on Monday, February the 10th, making her way to her final resting place. Hope's family would like to show their appreciation to the community for all their love, support and kindness since their tragic loss, and ask those that are able to line the streets leading to Adambury Cemetery as Hope passes by in her horse-drawn carriage." A further message posted on Friday laid out the exact route to the cemetery. "We will turn left out of the funeral home, continue up Almonvale East Road, turn right at the mini roundabout, along Dedridge East Road, continuing straight over the mini roundabout to Dedridge West Road, left onto Dedridge North Road, over the roundabout to Adambury," it read. They said they expected to arrive at Adambury Cemetery at about 1:15pm. A fundraising page launched by close family friend Melody Wielden to help cover the cost of Hope's Day has raised more than £10,000, more than 5 times its original £2,000 target. In a statement posted on the page, Miss Wielden said, "On January the 20th, 2025, our hearts shattered as we learned of the tragic and senseless murder of 6-year-old Hope. Hope was a vibrant and loving little girl, known for her infectious smile, kind spirit and deep love for animals. Hope's life was tragically cut short, leaving a void in the hearts of her family and friends that can never be filled." And the article was written by Laura Pollock. From the National, Monday the 10th of February, from the news section, over 50 firefighters tackle huge fire at Aberdeen truck dealership by James Walker. More than 50 firefighters have responded to a huge fire at a truck and van warehouse in Aberdeen. Multiple Scottish Fire and Rescue Service crews were called to the blaze at Northscott and Bridge of Dawn on Sunday evening. Firefighters from multiple stations in Aberdeen were joined by crews from Stonehaven, Peterhead, Inverurie, Ellen and Kintore at what was described as a well-developed fire. No injuries have been reported. A spokesperson for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service said, "We were called to a fire at Northscott and Bridge of Dawn at 7:32pm on Sunday evening. Crews from Central, North Anderson Drive, Dyche and Altons were all in attendance. They were later joined by crews from Stonehaven, Peterhead, Inverurie, Ellen and Kintore. Some of the crews were called in to allow others to return to their stations. They were tackling a well-developed fire in the building. There were no injuries reported. Police were also in attendance and supported crews by directing traffic in the area. And that report was written by James Walker. From the National, Monday the 10th of February 2025, from the news section. Super Bowl halftime performer arrested over Palestine-Sudan flag, by Joe Scotting. A performer in Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl halftime show has been detained and could face charges after unfurling a combination Palestinian-Sudanese flag. The NFL confirmed the person was part of the 400-member field cast for the annual concert. The New Orleans Police Department said in a statement that law enforcement is working to determine applicable charges in this incident. The individual will be banned for life from all NFL stadiums and events, an NFL spokesperson said in a statement. The performer stood in a car used as a prop for rapper's performance and held up the flag. The NFL said the individual hid the item on his person and unveiled it late in the show, and that no one involved with the production was aware of the individual's intent. Rock Nation, the company which produced the show, said the act was neither planned nor part of the production and was never in any rehearsal. The show continued without interruption, and it did not seem as though the person was shown in the broadcast of Lamar's performance. President Trump was in attendance at the event, which saw the Philadelphia Eagles deny the Kansas City Chiefs their fifth win of the American Football Championship. In a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump said that Gaza could become the Riviera of the Middle East, while refusing to rule out sending US troops to occupy the territory. The American president told journalists that the only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. He added, "It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down." In the article written by Joe Scotting. From the National, Monday the 10th of February, from the news section. UK will not change laws to please Donald Trump despite tariff threat, by Xander Elliards. US President Donald Trump has concerned UK government ministers after announcing a flat 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports, regardless of their origin. Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff, Trump told reporters on Sunday on Air Force One as he flew from Florida to New Orleans to attend the Super Bowl. When asked about aluminium, he responded that it too will be subject to the trade penalties. Trump also reaffirmed that he would announce reciprocal tariffs, probably Tuesday or Wednesday, meaning that the US would impose import duties on products in cases where another country has levied duties on US goods. If they're charging us 130% and we're charging them nothing, it's not going to stay that way, he told reporters. Asked on Monday morning about Trump's comments, Home Office Minister Angela Eagle said the Labour government will have to wait and see whether the president gets more specific about what he meant by that comment. She said, "We have a very balanced trading relationship with the US. I think £300 billion worth of trade between our countries, and I think it's in the best interest of both of us, as long-standing allies and neighbours, that we carry on with that balanced trade." UK officials are understood to be seeking further details regarding Trump's comments. The UK has so far avoided being hit with tariffs, while Trump has imposed, but then delayed, duties on imports from Mexico and Canada, as well as a 10% levy on goods from China. The President has previously suggested a deal could be done to exempt the UK from tariffs, while claiming Britain is out of line on its trading relationships with the US. Eagle denied that any such deal could see the UK government offer to water down online safety legislation. She said she had seen no corroboration that is likely to happen. When challenged over reports, such a move was being considered as a way of placating the tech bros that surrounded Trump. According to reports, the arrangement could see amendments to the Online Safety Act, which currently levies significant fines on US social media companies if they fail to take down harmful comment, offering in exchange for a favourable deal on tariffs. But Eagle poured cold water on the suggestion during an interview on ITV's Good Morning Britain on Monday morning, saying she can't imagine that we would be in a situation where we would want to see a weakening rather than a strengthening of safeguards in that area. While she acknowledged that tech bros in America had become very close to the new Trump administration, Eagle added, "I wouldn't have thought there would be any justification whatsoever for keeping violent videos available across the globe." Tech company bosses such as Meta's Mark Zuckerberg and Amazon's Jeff Bezos attended Trump's inauguration last month, while Twitter/X owner Elon Musk is a senior advisor to the president. Eagle's comments came in response to questions about the UK government's response to the murder of 3 young girls in Southport last year by a teenager who had watched violent videos online. They also found decisions by major social media companies to water down or abandon their content moderation systems that deal with harmful material, in some cases meaning videos viewed by Southport killer Axel Rudakabuna are still available. Those decisions appear to have been made in order to bring those companies into line with the laissez-faire approach of the US administration, typified by Musk, an outspoken critic of both the UK and the Online Safety Act. But a more lax approach to moderation also means these companies could run afoul of the Online Safety Act when it comes into force at the end of March, requiring social media platforms to remove illegal content and protect children from harmful or age-inappropriate material. Companies that fail to comply with the Act face fines of up to £18 million or 10% of a company's global revenue, whichever is greater, even if they are based abroad. And that article written by Xander Elliards.
From The National, Monday the 10th of February 2025, from the comments section. Scotland needs its own currency to have a well-being economy. Article by Jim Osborne. Polling conducted by Believe in Scotland indicates that the objective of a well-being economy has wide support among people who hold a variety of political views. Showing how independence can create a chance to embark on a transition towards such an economy is therefore likely to be critical to winning over undecided voters. We should at the outset consider the term well-being economy as shorthand for an economy driven by prioritising the needs of people and the need for us all to prosper within planetary limits. A commitment to well-being requires first of all to be framed in a new Scottish written constitution or a Bill of Rights. This would commit all future Scottish governments to ensuring all citizens have access to wholesome and nutritional food, adequate housing, affordable energy, rewarding work at a level of pay sufficient to sustain a socially acceptable standard of living, free health and social care services, free education, and pensions sufficient to maintain quality of life. Well-being also requires that everyone can participate in decision-making in matters which affect them. Advocates of conventional economics argue we must grow the economy in order to be able to pay for the public services well-being relies on. GDP is still seen as a top priority. It is based on the false belief that only the private sector creates the wealth public services rely on. The private sector does have an important role to play in a well-being economy, but can only fulfil this role if the state adopts policies which reallocate resources towards production of goods and services which people need in order to live well and in harmony with nature. What we do not need is an economy based on rising house and asset values or a focus on increasing GDP and consumption for its own sake. Fitting well-being objectives into the current model of the economy is like fitting a square peg in a round hole. A well-being economy requires transformation. So where do we start? Top priorities in the initial stages of the transformation would be rebuilding the health service and promoting healthier life choices and active lives and creating a robust social care system. Introduction of a proper level of minimum income and real living wage. Provisions for food security and increased national self-sufficiency, giving everyone access to food of sufficient nutritional value. Building national energy self-sufficiency and security and an energy system that ensures everyone has access to a reliable supply at minimum cost. building a new social housing and upgrading Scotland's housing stock. Unless the government has control of the nation's money supply by issuing its own currency, these policy objectives can only be implemented by borrowing in another currency and by relying heavily on private investment and/or foreign investment. Borrowing in another currency would mean Scotland having to use resources to increase exports to earn foreign currency, undermining the objective of transforming the economy to serve the needs of our people first and foremost. Foreign investment means we would be at the mercy of decisions taken elsewhere, and profits would be taken out of our economy to benefit overseas investors. Private investment would also be driven by commercial decisions which conflict with the priorities of a wellbeing economy transformation programme. These priorities can only be delivered by the state playing an active role in the economy in directing how our resources are used through its management of the currency and regulation of the financial system and the markets for essential goods and services. Nationalisation of key sectors might be required, although other forms of public ownership are possible, such as ownership in the hands of communities or local authorities, or mutual ownership via savings institutions and our pension funds. Given the active role of the state in leading the economic transformation, it is inevitable that there would be large fiscal deficit during the early years, and this can only be sustained if we have our own currency. Provided public spending is used effectively and our resources used wisely, then the deficit will be matched by new valuable assets which will benefit the people of Scotland. The effectiveness of the actions taken and the resources used to deliver the policy objectives should be scrutinised by a new and powerful National Audit Office. We will achieve more with the resources we have if they are used efficiently. We would also need to establish a resources ministry to identify the resources we will need to deliver our policy objectives, including what education and training our people need in both the short and long term to support the building of a wellbeing economy. And that article was written by Jim Osborne.
From The National, Tuesday the 11th of February 2025, from the news section. Scottish Harbour to turn into 7,000 capacity outdoor music venue. Article written by Laura Pollock. A Scottish harbour and freight yard will undergo a transformation to become one of Scotland's biggest outdoor music venues this summer. Peterson Sea Base at Port of Aberdeen will become a 7,000 capacity venue hosting top acts for the Tall Ships Races, Aberdeen 2025. The event will also feature food stalls and bars from July 19th until 22. The event, billed as Europe's largest free family event, is expected to draw 400,000 visits over its vibrant 4-day programme, making it Aberdeen's biggest event in a generation. The concert programme will feature 3 nights of ticketed events with major headline acts. Artist announcements and ticket details will be released soon. Peterson Sea Base will also host a free events programme, featuring Scottish headliners on Sunday night and a schedule of daytime, family-friendly entertainment. Highlights will include performances by local artists, ship bands, traditional sea shanty groups and more. The site is ordinarily used by supply chain solutions company Peterson Energy Logistics, an associate sponsor of Tall Ships Aberdeen, for the movement of goods, managing 1,000 lifts and 50 vehicles each day for clients in the oil and gas and renewables sectors. Operations will move to one of the company's other Aberdeen locations to accommodate the Tall Ships celebrations. Chris Coole, Joint UK Managing Director at Peterson Energy Logistics, said, "As a proud Aberdeen and maritime business, we are delighted to have been able to make this space available for the city and its visitors so the Tall Ships can host these fantastic entertainment events. Many of us will remember the iconic Tall Ships events in the 90s, and it is wonderful that as a city we are once again having the opportunity to showcase our region to the world." Councillor Martin Gregg, Aberdeen City Council's culture spokesman, said, "We are very grateful to Peterson for giving us the opportunity to provide a first-class concert venue at the very heart of the festival. The yard will become a fantastic spectacle in its own right, offering facilities and features for visitors of all ages, as well as hosting nationally and internationally famous bands who we will be announcing very soon." And that article was written by Laura Pollock. From the National, Tuesday the 11th of February 2025, from the Politics section. SNP to take action on council tax to make it better and fairer. Article written by Xander Elliards. The Scottish Government has announced action on council tax and has started canvassing for views on changing the system. Reforming Scotland's council tax system has been on the SNP agenda since before the party first took power in the 2007 Holyrood elections. However, finding consensus has proved difficult and the issue has remained unaddressed. In the party's 2021 Holyrood manifesto, it said the SNP were committed to reforming council tax to make it fairer, and said a citizens' assembly would be convened to discuss the route forward. Now, the Scottish Government has said that expert independent analysis will be commissioned to provide high-level analysis and modelling on the alternative scenarios and reforms of the system. It has also called for public views on the issue, ahead of a Scottish Parliament debate on the proposed reforms. The Government further said that as a part of a joint programme with local authority body COSLA, independent analysis will be commissioned to examine the council tax system, accounting for market changes, reforms and improvements. Finance Secretary Shona Robinson said, "Partnering with COSLA, we want to examine ways to make council tax fairer, which will help to continue to deliver better public services across Scotland. By working closely with local authorities and listening to the public, we will be seeking a consensus on a local taxation system that is fairer, financially sustainable and fits a modern Scotland." COSLA Resources spokesperson Councillor Katie Hagman said, "Local authorities wish to see a fair and proportionate council tax, which benefits people and communities. COSLA is looking forward to working with the Scottish Government on a programme of engagement with the public, with the shared goal of achieving a better, fairer system of local taxation." Council tax is also currently levied based on bands, with more expensive properties in higher bands. However, as many as half of all Scottish properties are thought to be in the wrong bands. Commonweal's Head of Policy, Craig Dalzell, previously told The National that reforming council tax could see lower bills for as many as 8 in 10 Scots, in part due to incorrect banding. The University of Glasgow's Professor Ken Gibb, the director of the UK Collaborative Centre for Housing Evidence, has suggested the proportionate property tax, PPT, could replace council tax. Oxfam are campaigning with Tax Justice Scotland for council tax reform. Lewis Ryder-Jones, Oxfam Scotland's advocacy advisor, said, "Council tax is enormously unfair and absurdly outdated. People's homes were last valued over 30 years ago, before the Scottish Parliament even existed. That's why Tax Justice Scotland, a campaign backed by over 50 organisations, is calling for modern, nationwide property and land valuations as a first step forward, replacing the council tax with a fairer alternative. We've already had nearly 2 decades of dilly-dallying. Instead of more discussions and delays, it's time for ministers to start delivering by laying out a roadmap to real reform." And that article was written by Xander Elliards. From the National, Tuesday the 11th of February 2025, from the news section. SPT pay out £120,000 to stop sugary Glasgow subway journeys. Article written by Joe Scotting. Glasgow Subway has spent more than £100,000 after complaints that the new fleet of trains are too sugary and noisy. Transport chiefs have forked out almost £120,000 to stop a new fleet of subway trains from being too unstable for passengers. Subway operators Strathclyde Partnership for Transport, SPT, paid out for more than 100 dampers on its new train cars that came into operation just over a year ago. Dampers are a component for trains which reduce noise generated from car movement. No safety issues were identified with the new subway cars, however, complaints have been made over sugary journeys. A report by the Scotsman on Tuesday shows SPT paid out £119,256 for 102 new dampers. The figure covers supporting of technical work, supply of new materials and installation. The new trains were launched as part of a £280 million modernisation programme that began in 2016. Starting in December 2023, SPT gradually began phasing out their older trains, replacing them with new cars that are wheelchair accessible and more modern. Not all subway stations are accessible, however. Although the Glasgow subway is a circular route, the design of the line still gives for some rough journeys. Passengers have complained that movements have been more extreme on the new train carriages. In 2024, 17 new trains were brought into service. The new additions had to be custom made due to the unique size of Glasgow subway. STP also had plans to introduce platform screen doors, PSDs, to all station platforms. The organisation hopes to introduce driverless trains to the subway system in the future. A spokesperson for SPT said, "Following feedback from some passengers, SPT paid for the retrofitting of dampers to be added to the new train fleet to improve the ride quality of the trains in the system. While what the train manufacturer delivered met the applicable standards set for trains, we requested the additional dampers to be added to further improve the ride. The price was quoted without VAT as SPT is able to reclaim the VAT amount and therefore it is cost neutral from SPT's perspective." And that article was written by Joe Scotting. From The National, Tuesday the 11th of February 2025, from the news section. Van Morrison announces 2 2025 Scottish shows. Article written by Laura Pollock. Legendary singer-songwriter Van Morrison has announced a rare run of live performances in Scotland this year. He has extended his run of 4 shows in the UK to include performances in both Glasgow and Edinburgh. Morrison will play at the Glasgow Royal Concert Hall on March 30th and Edinburgh Usher Hall on March 31st. Tickets go on sale at 9 a.m. this Friday, February 14th. The full show's dates are March 18th, Nottingham Royal Concert Hall, March 19th, Birmingham Symphony Hall, March 23rd, Oxford New Theatre, March 24th, Stroud Subscription Rooms, March 30th, Glasgow Royal Concert Hall, March 31st, Edinburgh Usher Hall. Tickets are available at the venue box office. Morrison found fame in the mid-1960s as the lead singer of the Northern Irish R&B and rock band, Them. His solo career began in 1967 with the release of his well-known hit single, Brown Eyed Girl. And that article was written by Laura Pollock.
This is from The National on Tuesday the 11th of February 2025, from the comments section. Critical thinking is a crucial defence against the rise of disinformation. This article is by Karen Adam. One of the great privileges of being an MSP is visiting schools across my constituency. Every time I step into a classroom, I'm struck by how engaged and switched on young people are. I think they're becoming even more so as the years go by. Perhaps that's due to information being more readily available. Or maybe it's just that young people have an innate ability to cut through the noise and see things as they are. My own children often tease me by showing AI-generated videos and pretending they're real, a classic Gen X versus Gen Z prank. Although, who doesn't love watching a skydiving Great Dane? But while some of these videos are clearly fake, others are disturbingly convincing. And that's where my thoughts have been lately, on misinformation and disinformation, and how both are shaping our world in increasingly dangerous ways. The rise of the far right no longer hides behind coded language or subtle messaging. It's out in the open. Mix that with the rapid advancement of AI-generated content and social media platforms controlled by right-wing oligarchs, and we have a serious problem. The other day, Humza Yousaf posted a powerful video on his social media addressing fear-mongering myths about Muslims. It was a stark reminder of how politicians deliberately target minority groups. Sometimes this tactic is glaringly obvious. Other times it's more insidious, creeping into our public discourse under the guise of legitimate debate. Do we have faith in people's ability to see through the hate and question why a particular group receives disproportionate negative press? A perfect example of the absurdity of disinformation was the claim that the SNP were banning cats. It was ridiculous, and yet the First Minister had to publicly debunk it. How did we get to a point where such an outlandish narrative could gain traction? This isn't just a one-off, it's a deliberate strategy. The techniques used to stir division and misinformation have been repeatedly used against the independence movement for years. Whether it's the idea that an independent Scotland couldn't survive economically, or that we'd be cast out into the wilderness by the international community. It's always the same playbook to create fear, manufacture outrage, and undermine rational debate. That's why I was heartened to visit a local school where pupils had created a parliamentary bill on tackling misinformation and its role in shaping public opinion. The level of critical thinking they applied was remarkable. They were a credit to their teachers, wider school staff, and, of course, themselves. It reinforced something I've long believed, that critical thinking is one of the most important skills we can teach, not just to young people, but to everyone. I also had the privilege of sitting in on a criminology class, where students were debating prison reform. They had studied expert analysis and concluded, quite objectively, that rehabilitation-based justice leads to lower reoffending rates. They recognised that an approach focused on rehabilitation rather than punishment reduces strain on drug and alcohol services, improves public health, and ultimately means fewer victims of crime. Isn't that what we all want? I challenged the class to imagine taking their findings to the Scottish Parliament. Would their evidence be enough to convince everyone? Not necessarily, because facts, as important as they are, don't always win in politics. I explained that debates in Parliament aren't just about data and outcomes, as they're often framed in a way that pits one vulnerable group against another. For instance, opponents of prison reform might argue, why should prisoners get counselling and access to better facilities when pensioners are struggling to make ends meet? This kind of framing is all too common on social media when one group is used to undermine the needs of another. And when policies such as rehabilitation are discussed in Parliament, there will always be voices that argue for a harsher, more punitive system. A perfect example of this played out in the Holyrood Chamber last week, when Russell Finlay berated the First Minister for funding prisons with gardens. It was exactly the kind of argument I had warned the students about. It wasn't about evidence or outcomes, it was about optics. Framing rehabilitation as soft on criminals stokes public fear and division, regardless of what works. We must be vigilant about the rise of fear-based politics. While the targeting of marginalised groups isn't new, what is new is the speed and sophistication with which these messages spread. Social media algorithms reward outrage, and with AI-generated misinformation becoming more advanced, we are at a crossroads. And that is why I find hope in our schools, where these conversations are happening before misinformation takes root. We're raising a generation that is learning to question, to analyse, and to challenge narratives designed to manipulate them. But this isn't just about young people, it's about all of us. We must equip ourselves with the critical thinking skills to push back against those who exploit fear for political gain. Some individuals genuinely believe the rhetoric they are fed, and they will fight fiercely for what they see as the truth. But the most dangerous figures are those who know exactly what they are doing, those who exploit misinformation, not because they believe it, but because they know it serves their agenda. That is why critical thinking is our best defence. It's why we must challenge every attempt to stoke division, call out misinformation, and ensure that the next generation is equipped to see through the tactics of those who seek power through fear. In an age of AI-generated content, social media manipulation, and a resurgent far right that no longer hides its intentions, we must stay alert. The good news? Our young people are already on it. And that article was written by Karen Adam and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 11th of February 2025, from the comments section. There's no end to Labour's ways to appeal to the right. This article is by Steph Patton. When I consider the themes of government over the last few years, there's a consistent note of cruelty across them all. Not only cruelty, but a perverse joy in its execution. The Rwanda scheme is a particular standout in its brazenness. But there are an infinity of smaller cruelties too in the works of our governments. The decision to spend £1,500 of taxpayers' money to paint over murals of cartoon characters in an asylum centre, lest children found it too welcoming. The BB Stockholm barge for asylum seekers, complete with its bug-infested food and bedding and outbreaks of Legionella. And now Labour's decision to share videos of dawn raids and unwelcoming immigration centres in an apparent bid to appeal to reform UK voters. Never mind the controls on immigration mug. There's apparently no end to the ways in which Labour will debase themselves to appeal to the right. And for what exactly? For a party in government, it's remarkable how ignorant Labour's leadership are of the current political climate. When Keir Starmer was granted the keys to number 10, it wasn't because Labour's offerings galvanised the masses, but because they represented change. And I don't mean change in the wishy-washy way that Labour's electoral campaign sat itself under the slogan of change. I mean regular, simple change, lowercase c, a means to kick the Tories to the curb for anything else. But now, it doesn't look much like change at all. Labour continue to slide to the right, continue to scapegoat minorities, continue above all to continue. Status quo from head to toe, and that's all you get. The defining element of the next electoral cycle will not be a matter of left or right, but establishment or anti-establishment. Starmer and his colleagues do not seem to understand that playing to the right on immigration is not some rot-brained political coup d'etat, but simply another notch on Nigel Farage's bedpost. With every concession to the far right, every adoption of their rhetoric and style, Labour sows the seeds of its future defeats, because in those dehumanising posts and snarling brags on record numbers of deportations, Reform voters won't walk away thinking, "Oh, what a good job that son of a toolmaker is doing." No, instead they'll be told definitively, "Everything Farage said was true. You were right to be afraid." It's simple. You cannot beat an anti-establishment party by aping its policies. In fact, as Labour and the Conservatives continue to doom spiral into the consequences of their collective failures over past decades, it seems that there is nothing these establishment parties can do to stop the far right. Because while Reform's hateful vision for the future of the UK will give us nothing, the fact that the establishment also has failed us is very real. It is for nothing at all that the Labour Party debases itself. It's a mistake that will cost it at the next election. But it is Labour's scapegoats that will pay the real price. More criminal exploitation of vulnerable asylum seekers. Families split apart. And worse. Last year was the deadliest one for asylum seekers in the care, if you can call it that, of the Home Office. Some 51 lives were lost among those in Home Office provided accommodation, with 21 of those initially swept under the rugs of its London offices. It was only after a Freedom of Information request that the true figure was revealed. One Iranian man is suspected of being lying dead in his accommodation for a month before he was discovered. Labour is maintaining the Conservative Party's policy of making the UK a hostile environment. And all the while, through this cruelty, still Labour polling falls, and the cycle continues. Labour roots out the remaining left-wingers who somehow, having held their noses long enough to remain in the party, then pledges to build bridges with political opponents on the right. Hop, step. Welcome Prime Minister Farage. Well, maybe not quite that far. At least not at the next election. It's the age-old tradition of very reasonable, very smart centrists confidently declaring their disgust of the far left and far right equally, before swanning into a fascist rally with the right branding. I doubt centrist thinkers have even given much consideration to just why they remain angrier at the thought of working with Jeremy Corbyn or Diane Abbott than Donald Trump. But c'est la vie. This tactic of total capitulation is just wrong, ethically and strategically. It goes against everything we know about politics. Reform UK and much of the British press want to set public opinion against migrants, to use them as a scapegoat and turn people away from the wealth hoarders of the world. Public opinion does not exist in a nebulous vacuum. It responds to the news, to campaigns. If Labour sets itself the task of simply following public opinion, then it will follow the influencers of public opinion. And whose interest does it serve to have a government so easily misled by those with the money to do so? And that article was written by Steph Patton and read by Lynn McNeil.
The National News on Wednesday the 12th of February. Big names pay their respects at Denis Law's funeral. An article written by Lucy Garcia. Sir Alex Ferguson led the tribute to Denis Law as the football community paid their final respects to the King in Manchester. A funeral was held yesterday for the much-loved former Scotland, Manchester United and Manchester City forward, who died aged 84 on January the 17th. Denis Law remains the only Scottish player to have ever won the Ballon d'Or, and no man has scored more goals for the national team. Sir Kenny Dalglish is joint top with him on 30 goals and was among the mourners. Sir Alex paid a heartfelt tribute during the service inside Manchester Cathedral. Denis Law was one of the greatest players at Man United, he said. Doesn't matter what time, all the time. Trying to place Denis in the pantheon of the great players is made easier by Pelé. Pelé was asked was there any British player who could play for the Brazil team. He said, without equivocation, Denis Law. The hearse made its way into the city centre from Old Trafford, where hundreds of fans congregated. Bagpipes played as the proud Scot and Aberdonian's coffin was carried into the packed funeral. United head coach Ruben Amorim and captain Bruno Fernandes were amongst those in attendance. Also there were former teammates, including Alex Stepney, Willie Morgan and Brian Kidd, plus former United players Wayne Rooney, Brian Robson, Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, Ruud van Nistelrooy and Peter Schmeichel. An article written by Lucy Garcia. The National News on Wednesday the 12th of February. The cause of death of a Scots couple in France is confirmed by police. An article written by Alistair Ferguson. The cause of death of a Scottish couple found in their home in rural France has been confirmed by French prosecutors. Andrew Searle and Dawn Kerr were discovered dead at their home in Les Pesquiers, south of Villefranche-de-Rouergue, at around 12:35 p.m. on Thursday by a neighbour. The couple, both aged in their 60s, had lived in the area for around 10 years and were reportedly well integrated into the community. French police confirmed that following a post-mortem, Mr. Searle died from hanging and Ms. Kerr suffered several blows to the skull using a blunt and sharp object. French prosecutors said in a statement published on Tuesday that police inquiries were ongoing to determine whether the couple died as a result of a murder-suicide or if a third party was involved. The prosecutor in charge of the case, Nicolas Rigaud-Muller, told the PA news agency investigators are not prioritising any lead between the theory of a domestic crime followed by a suicide or that of a double homicide carried out by a third party, linked either to a financial motive or the deceased past. According to his LinkedIn page, Mr. Searle was a retired fraud investigator specialising in financial crime prevention who worked at companies including Standard Life and Barclays Bank. A neighbour of the British couple found Ms. Kerr lying dead in front of her house, partly undressed, and called the emergency services at 12:27, prosecutors said. As they entered, emergency services found the body of Mr. Searle hanged inside the house. The prosecutor's statement continued. The two deceased persons, a man and a woman, were the owners of the house in which their bodies were discovered. They were British expatriates, retired, and had been living in the area for several years. The first victim, Miss Kerr, has a significant head injury. A box containing jewellery was found near to her, but no item or weapon which could have caused the injuries was located. Mr. Searle, who was found hanged, did not show any visible defensive injuries. The prosecutor said that post-mortem examinations carried out in Montpellier on Monday found that Ms. Kerr had died having received several blows to the head using a blunt or sharp object. No signs of sexual assault was found and no weapons have been recovered. Mr. Searle died as a result of hanging, the statement added. The statement said that other tests, including toxicology, are currently ongoing. An article written by Alistair Ferguson.
This is an article taken from the news pages of The National, published on Wednesday, the 12th of February. It's written by Xander Elliots. Protesters blockade Glasgow and Edinburgh universities over links to Gaza genocide. Student protesters have blockaded university buildings in Edinburgh and Glasgow in a demonstration against Scottish institutions' links to weapons firms supplying Israel. At the University of Edinburgh, students have barred the entrances to the Finance Building, Charles Stewart House, in a protest against what they say is the university continuing to aid and abet genocide through financial complicity and research ties. And at Glasgow University, around 50 students have blocked entrances to the Rankin Engineering Building, after the institution's ruling council refused to heed a majority of staff and student voices, and end its ties with arms firms. Protesters in Glasgow carried banners with slogans such as "No More Business as Usual" and "Long Live the Student Intifada." Callum McRae, a student involved in the protest, said, "Despite acknowledging that there is widespread support for divestment, the university refuses to cut ties with the arms industry. Statements lamenting the horror in Gaza are meaningless, unless accompanied by concrete steps to dismantle their financial and ideological complicity in the Israeli apartheid state. We will not be ignored, and will take action to stop business as usual at the university, until these vital changes are made. We look forward to the day when management joins the majority of the staff and student body, in pushing for a better world, not just with words, but with action." In Edinburgh, protesters held banners reading, "It's our time, shut it down for Palestine," and "Globalise the Student Intifada." In a statement, the Edinburgh University Justice for Palestine Society said, "It has been 76 years since the beginning of the Israeli settler colonial project, and we have now witnessed 15 months of intensified genocide of the Palestinian people, yet the university continues to aid and abet genocide through financial complicity and research ties with companies creating apartheid technologies." Despite the news of a ceasefire, which has been repeatedly broken by Israel, the conditions of occupation, apartheid and ethnic cleansing remain. As history has shown us, the university will do nothing to combat its complicity. Over the past year, any progress in support of Palestine has only been achieved through the campaigning and direct action of students. Students all over Scotland continue to escalate for divestment, in solidarity with Palestine and each other. We stand united in the struggle, and send our full support to them. The protest group has claimed that Edinburgh University holds more than £39 million in companies which are complicit in funding Israel, including £30 million in BlackRock, £3.6 million in Amazon, £2.6 million in Booking.com, and £2.2 million in Albemarle. Glasgow University had an endowment fund worth £262 million at the end of July 2024. A publicly available list of investments from 2023 includes shares in weapons firms linked to Israel, such as BAE Systems, Lockheed Martin, and Thales. A protest last week saw buildings at the university vandalized, and 2 arrests made. A Glasgow University spokesperson said, "The the University of Glasgow upholds the right to freedom of expression, including the right of staff and students to engage in peaceful demonstrations. However, we do not tolerate activities which interfere with the rights of others to go about their business in peace. As an institution, we stand against hate or harassment of any kind. We regularly communicate with all our staff and students about the need for tolerance towards each other, and we reiterate this call for all members of our community to be respectful at all times. A University of Edinburgh spokesperson said, "The horror of the violence and loss of life in the Middle East has been felt deeply by many in our community, and we continue to support our students and staff impacted by the conflict, alongside the many others within our community who share the pain of those suffering. While we respect the right to peaceful protest, we do not support protesters preventing access to a building. The day-to-day running of the university and the safety of everyone on campus is our priority, and we are clear that disciplinary action may be taken should anyone breach its student code of conduct. We are reviewing our approach to responsible investments, including refreshing our responsible investment policy, with a related advisory group being established. We will continue to engage with those raising concerns." That article was written by Xander Elliotts.
The National News on Wednesday the 12th of February. Runner preparing to hit the streets for marathon number 20. An article issued by the National News Desk. A runner will take on his 20th marathon in London in April in aid of sight loss charity the RNIB. Archie McGregor, who's 64 and from Edinburgh, is also close to reaching his lifetime fundraising target of £26,200, mirroring the traditional 26.2-mile marathon distance. Mr McGregor's son, now 33, was supported by the RNIB Scotland youth group as a child, taking part in various activities such as rock climbing, abseiling and water sports, all made accessible for the group. "The youth group was brilliant for my son and helping him build confidence and independence," says Mr McGregor. "The team was so supportive of all the children there, and the impact they've made has really stayed with us over the years." After sustaining an injury during his first marathon in Edinburgh in 2005, Mr McGregor took a break before returning to complete the New York event in 2007. That sparked a new challenge, taking on the World Marathon Majors. He's completed marathons in London, Berlin, New York, Chicago, Boston and Tokyo. Since then, I've added many more cities to my list, including Stockholm, Zagreb, Paris, Bucharest and Milwaukee. "It's a great way to see the world," Mr McGregor said. "In 2012, I ran the Boston and London marathons within 6 days of each other and learned the hard way to stick to my training programme. The experience is different every time. In Tokyo, we were all at the starting line shivering at 0 degrees Celsius, whereas in Boston it was 29 degrees Celsius and people were being treated for heat exhaustion. In London, the RNIB cheer squad always gives us a boost. You can't miss them. This is my way of giving back for their support they gave my son, and thanks to unbelievable generosity from family, friends and colleagues, I'm now really close to my goal." An article issued by the National News Desk. The National News on Wednesday the 12th of February. SNP blasts Scottish factory shifting its production to England. An exclusive article written by Joe Scotting. The SNP has condemned the decision to close a factory in Forres and shift production south of the border. Forres New World Foods, which produces meat snacks as part of Valio Foods UK, confirmed that it's set to close its doors and move production to Wigan and York. The company is eyeing a closing date of the 30th of April for the Murray site, citing logistical issues and the area's remote location as the reasons behind the closure. Reacting to the closure, Emma Roddick, the MSP for the Highlands and Islands, told The National, "This is really disappointing news for the local workforce, and I struggle to accept the weak justification which has been offered for the closure." She continued, "The north of Scotland, including Murray, has consistently demonstrated our world-class quality food and drink production. It's inexcusable. We should instead be celebrated and held up as a very desirable brand and an exceptional place to do business." This is driven in part by the UK government's continuing to allow the Highlands and Moray to be treated as separate to the rest of the mainland and failing to take action on unfair surcharges, be it postage or electricity. Her comments are echoed by Business Secretary Richard Lochhead, who branded the closure as deeply disappointing. He told The National that because of Murray's food and drink production heritage, the closure will lead many to question the credibility of their case for closing the forest factory. A spokesperson for Value Foods UK said, "Forest presents significant logistical challenges due to its remote location. These challenges have made it increasingly difficult to maintain cost efficiencies, which are crucial in today's competitive market. The York site has the immediate capacity to handle current production volumes, and it's well positioned to support both our short and medium-term growth objectives." An exclusive article written by Joe Scotting.
This is from The National on Thursday, 13th February 2025. From the Culture section. Scottish auction house U-turns hours after selling Nazi memorabilia. By Xander Elliards. A Scottish auction house has U-turned and said it will no longer include Nazi and SS artefacts in future auctions. Several artefacts from the Third Reich went under the hammer in the Militaria auction at McTeers in Glasgow on Wednesday. They included a 1939 Iron Cross medal and a 1933 badge featuring a swastika, which together sold for a hammer price of £300, and Nazi bunting, also emblazoned with the swastika, which sold for £50. A Third Reich Luftwaffe dress dagger sold for £220, while items linked to high-profile Nazi Hermann Göring were also included in the sale. McTeers said it fully understands the sensitivity around the sale of such items and will no longer include them in future sales, adding that it will receive no income in fees from the Third Reich-related artefacts sold on Wednesday. While it is not illegal to sell Nazi memorabilia in the UK, sales of such items have been controversial. In 2019, Bloomfield Auctions in Belfast cancelled a sale of such artefacts after an outcry from Jewish leaders. A spokesperson for McTeers Auctioneers said, "As the only auctioneer in Scotland to run dedicated sales of historic militaria, McTeers has frequently auctioned important artefacts from both world wars, some of which have been purchased by museums both in the UK and overseas. On occasion, our auctions, like many others across the world, have included a small number of items relating to Nazi Germany, which have always been handled with sensitivity. It is important to note that these historical artefacts provide a tangible link to an important, albeit extremely dark, era in our history that should never be forgotten. That said, we fully understand the sensitivity surrounding the sale of these particular historical items and have now taken the decision to cease the inclusion of Nazi and SS artefacts in future auctions. With regard to the items sold in today's Militaria sale, McTeers will receive no income in fees. Other artefacts in Wednesday's sale included 2 silver plates thought to be from Göring's personal train dining wagon, which sold for £500 each, and an item described as a Third Reich North Africa propaganda £1 note, which sold for £10. That article was by Xander Elliards. This is from The National on Thursday, 13th February 2025. From the Culture section. 3 Glasgow cocktail bars named among UK's best. By Amy Miles. 3 Glasgow cocktail bars have been ranked among the UK's top 50. Daddy Marmalades in the Merchant City was the highest ranked Glasgow bar, coming in at 18. The bar, which opened in 2022, was praised for its outstanding cocktails and homemade pizzas. Mixologists Mary Kierchia and Kim Toft said on Instagram, "We're absolutely delighted to announce that we've made it onto the 2025 50 Cocktails Bars list. This was something that not long ago we thought we could only dream of. Having your hopes and dreams come to life is the very best feeling, and we really want to give a million thank yous to 50 Cocktail Bars and everyone who voted for us, spoke kindly of us, and came to visit us at Daddy's. We're 2 very, very happy bartenders on Parney Street this weekend." The Absent Ear, also in the Merchant City, was the second highest ranked Glasgow bar, coming in at 33. The guide was impressed by their constantly rotating menu of cocktails. The bar said on Instagram, "A huge thank you for all your support over the past 12 months. Taking a chance on our silly wee ideas means a whole lot to us. Come celebrate with us soon." The third Glasgow bar to make the list was The Gate on Gallowgate, which came in at 43. Opened in 2019, The Gate is described as a hidden gem of a cocktail bar in Glasgow and a perfect spot for all the whisky enthusiasts. Praised for their innovative approaches to classic cocktails, the guide says that The Gate stands as a testament to Glasgow pub culture. That article was by Amy Miles.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and tell your friends about our service.